Well, the fundamental objective of IMM is to monitor the impacts FLEGT BPAs and FLEGT licensing is having on the market, and we are doing that through a dual approach of, on the one hand, looking at trade flow trends, and on the other hand, conducting market analysis and market surveys in order to be able to correctly attribute changes in trade flows.
This just gives an overview of the growth of the tropical wood trade over the last 15 years. Contrary to a lot of perceptions in the EU, where there is this perception that the tropical wood trade is diminishing, of course, elsewhere in the world that is not true. Overall, the global trade in tropical wood has been rising. This data shows that the total trade was approaching $34 billion in 2017. It shows that there has been a consistent rise in global trade in tropical wood products, particularly in the furniture sector over the last 14 years. That's contributed by 4 major supplying countries: Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia. So that has seen consistent growth over the last 17 years. There's been a bit of a decline in global trade in sawnwood and moldings and in plywood over that period, but a lot of growth in trade in composite products and also in fuel wood and primary products. And of course, the trade in logs has been particularly volatile, spiking in the year 2014 during the speculative boom in rosewood particularly. But that diminished in the next 2 years, and then there was a bit of a rebound in trade in 2017. There's 15 countries that are involved in the VPA process. They're at various stages of the VPA process. Those countries account for around 80% of global trade in tropical wood products. And it's been about 80% for the last 5 years. It's a fairly consistent pattern. There has been a longer-term decline in the relevance of those countries to the global trade since 2009. There were 1 or 2 trade flows that have evolved during that period, which are not in any way involved in the VPA process, particularly log exports from PNG, from the Solomon Islands and Mozambique. There's been a big rise, of course, during that period in rosewood exports from Nigeria. And also we're seeing a rise now in furniture exports from Indonesia. But one of the things I wanted to highlight particularly from this chart is the dark green trade flow, which is the Indonesian trade flow. Since November 2016, there has been FLEGT licensed products on the market. It's important not to underestimate the extent of the achievement there and the extent of the trade in tropical wood products from Indonesia. Indonesia is the world's largest tropical exporter in 2017. It's been caught gradually by Vietnam, but it remains the largest single exporter of tropical wood products if we include pulp and paper. And in fact, in 2017, Indonesia exported over 200,000 issued over 200,000 V-legal certificates covering products with a total value of $10.8 billion and covering 15 million tons. So this has the SPLK, on which the FLEGT licensing system is based, has emerged as a very significant legality verification system for the global tropical wood trade. Just this slide here shows the same data, but it now looks at how the timber is exported, which are the major regions of import for the tropical wood products. It shows very clearly, the orange line shows very clearly that in 2004, the EU was the major export market for tropical wood products worldwide. But of course, it's now only the 4th largest region for tropical wood imports around the world. Now, this slide shows total EU imports of wood products by product group. Again, the trends are pretty obvious. There was a big decline in EU wood product imports during the financial crisis, quite a significant recovery in the year, particularly in the year 2015, And since then, growth in imports into the EU of all wood products has grown, but relatively slowly. And that again mirrors some of the figures that Fran was showing, the relatively slow pace of growth in the construction sector. And something which isn't evident from this slide is the continuing rise in the dominance of the domestic manufacturing sector in the EU. Across most product groups in the EU, the domestic wood manufacturing sector accounts for at least 80% of the supply and consumption. So with a lot of tropical countries, they're competing not only with other tropical countries, but also with a very dominant domestic production sector. This shows specifically the value of EU imports into the EU from the tropics by VPA status. It shows that in contrast to the growth in overall imports, total EU imports from the tropics has been declining in the last couple of years, in 2016 and 2017. In fact, it fell in 2017 by 2% to 3.78 billion. This shows how the imports of wood products, the share of imports of wood products by the source of supply has changed over the last 15 years. And what it shows very clearly, the blue section at the bottom, which is the share of tropical wood imports, that has fallen continuously from 36% in 2004 to 21% in 2014. There was a very, very slight rebound in the share of tropical wood products in the EU market in 2015 and 2016, but again, last year the share fell again back to 21%. Tropical countries in the EU market, they initially lost share to China, but more recently the big loss of share has been to North America and particularly to Russia, the CIS and non-EU European countries. And this just looks in a bit more detail at recent trends in EU imports from the tropics by product type. In 2015, 2016, there was a recovery. We see that across all product groups, of course, there was a big decline during the financial crisis. But in recent years, there has been a bit of a recovery in furniture and sawnwood. But in 2017, there was again this big decline in tropical sawn imports from Africa. But the tropical furniture imports have continued to rise into the EU. Joinery products from the tropics have been fairly stable. This is mainly glulam and doors, and also fairly stable imports of other processed products and biomass from the tropical countries. But certain sectors, there is continuing long-term decline in imports, particularly, obviously, tropical logs and also tropical flooring products.
Recommendation would be that as fast as possible, Indonesia and the EU should try to go ahead with a fully electronic licensing system and import procedures in the EU in order to maximize the green lane benefits. That was something that was brought up by a lot of EU importers, that they were hoping for a fully electronic system. Also, communications between the competent authorities and Indonesia, it should be ensured that Indonesian authorities are being made aware of all cases of FLEGT license mismatches that occur in the EU, because figures we've heard from Indonesian Liu and our own sort of analysis of FLEGT data indicates that there are some discrepancies. Also, what we've heard a lot and what is pretty obvious is that a wider geographic spread is essential for the market development of FLEGT licensing. At the moment, it's just Indonesia and Indonesian products, and for it to be fully recognized in the markets, in other regulations and product codes and whatever, there should be a broader range of products from a broader range of countries. So completion of VPA implementation, especially in key supplier countries, is crucial.